20 remedies you have in your pantry that actually work. Hello, herbalists. What if the most powerful pharmacy you've ever had access to isn't a building with neon lights and a counter with a window? What if it's your kitchen, your pantry, your grandmother's back cupboard? We're talking about remedies so effective that soldiers used them on the battlefield, so reliable that they were passed down through generations before anyone even knew what a germ was, and so forgotten that most people today laugh at them until they actually work. And here's what no one tells you. Modern research is quietly confirming what our great-grandparents already knew. These remedies worked then. They work now. And they're in your home right now. Stay until remedy number 18. It was used by dentists before modern anesthesia existed, and its active ingredient is still in dental products today. And remedy number 20 was used in medieval Europe for the most serious infected wounds. And it works on the same principle as hospital-grade dressings. Like this video if you remember seeing any of these remedies at your grandparents' house. Subscribe, we post every week. There is something that deeply catches my attention when I think about these remedies. This convergence is no coincidence. It is the result of thousands of years of careful human observation. They tested, observed, discarded what didn't work, and moved forward with what did. What has reached us has already passed the most demanding filter there is. Generations of real human beings in real situations. Today we give a scientific name to what they already knew, and we recover what should never have been forgotten. 20 remedies, from impressive to absolutely incredible. 3 things to guide you. First, one of these remedies uses the exact same active ingredient as the medical-grade wound dressings used in hospitals today. Only in this case, the ingredient is something everyone has at home, and that's always been thrown away without a second thought. Second, there's a remedy on this list that the World Health Organization studied as a basis for oral rehydration solutions during cholera epidemics. The ingredient is the leftover liquid from cooking rice, the stuff we always pour down the sink. And third, clove oil, which was used as a dental anesthetic before lidocaine existed, is still present in the dental cements and root canal sealants dentists use today. The dental pharmaceutical industry has been using it for centuries. It's just that nobody tells you that. Let's begin. Remedy number 1. Fermented garlic and honey. Pantry antimicrobial. 2 ingredients. 1 jar. The pharmacy that gets better the longer you ignore it. We'll start with one of the most potent homemade remedies you can make with ingredients almost everyone already has. Garlic and honey ferment is exactly what it sounds like. Crushed raw garlic submerged in raw honey and left to ferment for weeks. It seems simple. It sounds simple. But what happens inside the jar is anything but trivial. Garlic contains allicin, one of the most studied natural antimicrobials on the planet. Raw honey has its own antimicrobial properties, including hydrogen peroxide production and such low water activity that it kills bacteria. When they combine and ferment, they enhance each other's effects. Traditional healers in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Asia use some version of this remedy for winter colds, sore throats, and infections. Before antibiotics, this was first-line medicine. Why it works? Garlic's allicin has documented antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal activity. Raw honey produces hydrogen peroxide and has very low water activity, which inhibits bacterial growth. Together, they act synergistically, not just additively. How to prepare it? Crush a whole head of raw garlic. Submerge it completely in raw honey in a clean jar. Close loosely to allow gases to escape. Leave at room temperature for 3 or 4 weeks, turning the jar over daily. At the first sign of a cold, take a clove with a spoonful of the fermented honey. Remedy number 2. Hot onion poultice. Chest and bronchial congestion. It smells strong, and that's exactly why it works. A hot onion poultice is the remedy that elicits the most eye rolls when you mention it. Crushed, hot onions wrapped in a cloth and applied to the chest. Sounds like something a desperate grandmother would do. But the grandmothers were right. Onions contain sulfur compounds from the same family as garlic. When heated and crushed, these compounds become volatile. They are released into the air and penetrate the skin. When applied to the chest, they penetrate the tissue, stimulate circulation, thin mucus, and reduce inflammation in the bronchi. Traditional European medicine, especially in Russia, Germany, and Eastern Europe, used onion poultices as a serious treatment for deep chest colds, bronchitis, and infant croup. Modern research confirms that volatile sulfur compounds in alliums have documented anti-inflammatory and mucolytic effects. Why it works? Volatile sulfur compounds penetrate the tissue, reducing bronchial inflammation and thinning mucus. The heat from the poultice increases local circulation, speeding up recovery. How to prepare it? Chop or crush 2 large onions. Gently heat them in a pan. Just warm them, don't cook them. Wrap them in a cloth and apply to the chest for 20 or 30 minutes. For the feet, the same process. Wrap the warm onions around the soles of the feet, cover with wool socks and sleep. Remedy number 3, fire cider. Immunostimulant and anticatarrhal. It tastes like fire, and it works like a rocket. Fire cider is the remedy people either swear by completely or have never heard of. There's almost no middle ground. The basic formula: raw apple cider vinegar infused with raw garlic, fresh ginger, horseradish, chili peppers, and sometimes onion, turmeric, and black pepper. It's left to infuse for 4 weeks, strained, and taken by the spoonful at the first sign of a cold, sinus infection, or weakened immune system. The name is accurate. It tastes like fire, and it works like a charm. Each ingredient has separately documented antimicrobial, circulation-boosting, and immune-stimulating properties. Horseradish is one of the most potent natural decongestants around. Folk healers in Appalachia, New England, and Europe maintained variations of this concoction under different names for centuries. Why it works? Apple cider vinegar creates an acidic environment that many pathogens cannot tolerate. Allicin from garlic and gingerol from ginger have antimicrobial activity. Horseradish dramatically opens nasal passages. Capsaicin stimulates circulation and activates the immune system. How to prepare it? Chop a head of garlic, a large piece of fresh ginger, several tablespoons of grated horseradish, and a handful of chili peppers. Pack into a jar and cover completely with raw apple cider vinegar. Cover and leave for 4 weeks, shaking daily. Strain, sweeten with honey to taste, and take 1 or 2 tablespoons at the first sign of illness. Remedy number 4, mustard foot bath. Fever and nasal congestion. Hot water, mustard powder, and feet. Field hospital medicine. A mustard foot bath seems too simple to be effective. Hot water, mustard powder, feet. But military field hospitals used it. Midwives recommended it. Field nurses applied it. And they kept doing it because it consistently worked. Mustard contains compounds called isothiocyanates, which are potent circulatory stimulants. Dissolved in hot water and applied to the feet, they penetrate the skin, dramatically increasing blood flow to the extremities. This has a direct effect. It draws blood away from the congested head and chest, reduces fever pressure, opens capillaries, and stimulates the kind of sweating that helps the body process and eliminate infection. The feet have some of the largest pores in the body, and one of the most reactive circulatory responses. Why it works? The isothiocyanates in mustard penetrate the skin of the feet, stimulating peripheral circulation. This redistributes blood away from the congested head and reduces fever pressure. The sweating effect helps clear the infection. How to prepare it? 2 tablespoons of mustard powder in a bucket of water as hot as you can comfortably tolerate. Soak your feet for 20 minutes wrapped in a warm blanket. Drink hot water or herbal tea simultaneously. Expect to sweat. That's the goal. Remedy number 5, activated charcoal poultice. Localized infections and bites. The same mechanism used in emergency medicine for poisonings, applied to the skin. Activated charcoal is getting attention today for black smoothies and trendy teeth whitening. But its true history as medicine is much more serious than that. For centuries, healers used poultices of activated charcoal mixed with water or flaxseed paste and applied to infected wounds, spider bites, insect stings, and areas of skin infection. The mechanism is real and well documented. Activated charcoal is extraordinarily porous at a microscopic level and binds toxins, bacteria, and inflammatory compounds through a process of adsorption. It draws them out of the tissue and retains them. This is not folklore. Activated charcoal is used today in emergency medical settings for poisonings. The same mechanism works externally on localized infections and stings. Traditional healers in North America, Europe, and indigenous cultures around the world independently discovered charcoal's extractive properties. Why it works? Activated charcoal has extreme microscopic porosity that adsorbs toxins, bacteria, and inflammatory compounds, drawing them out of the tissue. It's the same mechanism used in emergency rooms for poisonings, applied externally. How to prepare it? Mix activated charcoal powder with enough water to form a thick paste. For better adhesion, add a tablespoon of ground flaxseed. Spread on a cloth, apply to the affected area, cover with another cloth, and leave for several hours or overnight. Herbalists, we've covered five remedies that most of you have seen or heard about at your grandparents' house without knowing exactly why they worked. Now come the ones with the most surprising mechanisms. And among them, the two I promised at the beginning. Remedy number 6, enhanced salt and vinegar gargle. Sore throat and oral infections, the salt gargle everyone knows, but the improved version that ancient healers actually used. Gargling with salt water is well known. It kills bacteria, reduces inflammation, and draws fluid from swollen throat tissue through osmosis. But traditional healers didn't stop there. They added a splash of raw apple cider vinegar, which changes the pH and increases the antimicrobial potency. Some added a pinch of turmeric with its well-documented anti-inflammatory properties. The result wasn't just a salt rinse. It was a complete therapeutic gargle that worked on multiple mechanisms simultaneously. Osmotic pressure to reduce swelling, an acidic pH that disrupts bacterial membranes, and anti-inflammatory compounds in direct contact with the inflamed tissue. Greek physicians were already recommending seawater gargles. Medieval healers prescribed them for tonsillitis and oral infections before any surgical options existed. Why it works? Salt draws fluid out of the swollen tissue through osmosis. Apple cider vinegar changes the pH, creating a hostile environment for bacteria. Turmeric, in direct contact with the inflamed tissue, reduces inflammation locally. How to prepare it? 1 teaspoon of sea salt in a glass of water as hot as you can tolerate. 1 tablespoon of raw apple cider vinegar. 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric, optional. Gargle for 30 seconds, 4 to 6 times a day. Do not swallow. Remedy number 7, vinegar compress for fever. Mild fever and headache. Before paracetamol, before aspirin. The kind nurses and midwives used. Before paracetamol, before aspirin, before any pharmaceutical fever reducer, people used vinegar compresses. And they used them because they worked. A cloth soaked in diluted apple cider vinegar and applied to the forehead, back of the neck, or wrists works through 2 simultaneous mechanisms. First, the evaporation of the vinegar cools the skin surface, drawing heat from the body just like sweating, but faster. Second, the acetic acid in apple cider vinegar has anti-inflammatory properties that reduce the inflammatory signaling that drives fever. Nurses in the 19th and early 20th centuries routinely used vinegar compresses for patients with fever. Midwives recommended them, and decades of clinical observation have confirmed their effectiveness. Why it works? The evaporation of vinegar cools the skin's surface just like sweating, but faster. Acetic acid has anti-inflammatory properties that reduce fever signals. Applied to sunburns, it neutralizes the alkaline compounds of sun damage and reduces pain. How to prepare it? 1 part raw apple cider vinegar to 2 parts cold water. Soak a cloth, wring it out partially, and apply to forehead and wrists. Refresh every 10 minutes as it warms up. Remedy number 8, herbal steam for the respiratory tract. Sinusitis, chest cold, and bronchitis, the only delivery system that takes the medicine exactly where the problem is. Herbal steam inhalation is one of the most universally practiced folk remedies in human history, and it remains one of the most effective things you can do for your sinuses and lungs. Boiling water, herbs, a towel over your head. It's that simple. But the specific herbs matter a great deal. Thyme contains thymol, one of the most potent natural antiseptics known. So potent, in fact, that it's the active ingredient in commercial mouthwashes. Inhaled as steam, thymol comes into direct contact with mucous membranes, killing pathogens. Eucalyptus contains cineol, which opens the airways and has documented antiviral activity. Peppermint contains menthol, which immediately relaxes the airways. Together in steam, they go straight to where the infection is. Why it works? Thymol from thyme is a broad-spectrum antiseptic that comes into direct contact with mucous membranes. Cineol from eucalyptus opens airways and has antiviral activity. Menthol from mint is an immediate bronchodilator. Combining all three in a vapor is the only way to deliver the active ingredients directly to the site of infection. How to prepare it? Bring water to a boil. Add 1 tablespoon of each herb: dried thyme, eucalyptus leaves, and mint. Remove from heat. Place on a stable surface. Lean your head over the pot. Cover your head and the pot with a towel, and breathe slowly and deeply for 10 to 15 minutes. Do this twice a day for sinusitis and chest colds. Remedy number 9. Raw honey with black pepper. Irritating cough and sore throat. The WHO lists it as a remedy for coughs, and it outperforms cough syrup in clinical trials. 2 pantry staples. No cooking required. One of the most effective cough remedies ever devised. Raw honey alone outperforms dextromethorphan, the active ingredient in most over-the-counter cough syrups, in several clinical trials for reducing nighttime coughs in children. The World Health Organization lists it as a cough remedy. The mechanism is twofold. It coats and soothes irritated throat tissue and delivers antimicrobial compounds directly to the source of infection. Black pepper adds something entirely different. Piperine, its active compound, is a potent circulatory stimulant applied to mucous membranes. It dilates blood vessels, increases local warmth, stimulates immune activity, and breaks up congestion. It is also a natural antihistamine. Ayurvedic medicine has used honey and black pepper together for respiratory ailments for thousands of years. Why it works? Raw honey coats irritated tissue and delivers antimicrobials directly. Piperine from black pepper dilates blood vessels, boosts the immune system, and acts as a natural antihistamine. The warmth of the spice and the soothing properties of honey create a balanced therapeutic effect. How to prepare it? 1 tablespoon of raw honey with a 1/4 teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. Mix and swallow slowly, allowing it to coat the throat. Repeat every 2 to 3 hours during the illness. Remedy number 10. Potato slices on the forehead. Mild fever, the remedy that provokes the most laughter, and it turns out it has a completely real physical basis. Raw potato slices on the forehead. This is the remedy that elicits the most laughter when mentioned. The very definition of grandmotherly superstition, except that it appears independently in Eastern European folk medicine, Latin American healing traditions, and rural Appalachian practices. Cultures with no connection to one another. Raw potatoes are naturally cool and maintain that coolness very consistently due to their high water and starch content. Applied to the forehead, they provide gentle, sustained cooling without the harshness of ice. They draw heat from the skin by conduction, the same physical principle as cold compresses, but the potato doesn't heat up as quickly, doesn't drip, and stays in place on its own. Cooling the extremities actually reduces core temperature by improving peripheral vasodilation. Why it works? Raw potatoes consistently retain their coolness due to their high water and starch content. The gentle, sustained cooling effect on the forehead and feet reduces core temperature through peripheral vasodilation. The starch creates a mild astringent effect on the skin. How to prepare it? Cut a raw potato into 1/2 centimeter slices. Cool slightly if desired. Place on the forehead and replace when they warm up. For the feet, place slices on the soles covered with cotton socks. The next 10 are the ones that surprise me the most when I study them, and among them are the 2 I promised at the beginning. Remedy number 11, castor oil pack. chronic digestion, and abdominal inflammation the remedy that naturopaths never abandoned because they kept seeing it work. The castor oil pack is the remedy that natural medicine practitioners never completely abandoned throughout the 20th century of pharmaceutical dominance. They continue to use it because they continued to see it work. The method: a cloth saturated with castor oil applied to the abdomen, covered with plastic and with a heat source on top, a hot water bottle or heating pad, left for an hour or more, 3 or 4 times a week for chronic conditions. Castor oil contains ricinoleic acid, which has documented anti-inflammatory effects. When applied with heat and for an extended period, it penetrates deeply into the tissue. Research has shown that castor oil packs increase lymphocyte activity, the central white blood cells of the immune response, in the underlying tissue. They appear to promote lymphatic circulation, which is the body's internal waste removal and immune surveillance system. Why it works: ricinoleic acid has documented anti-inflammatory effects. With heat and time, it penetrates deep into the tissue. Studies show increased lymphocyte activity in the underlying tissue, stimulation of the lymphatic system, cleansing, and immune surveillance. How to prepare it: soak a piece of flannel in cold-pressed castor oil. Place it on your abdomen, cover with plastic wrap, and apply heat for 60 to 90 minutes. Rest completely during the process. Remedy number 12: poultice of cabbage leaves. Swollen joints and swelling. Several published clinical trials show that swelling decreases faster with cabbage than with standard treatment. Cabbage leaves wrapped around swollen joints, applied to the chest, packed around arthritic knees. It sounds like desperation, but there's something very few people know. There are actual clinical trials, peer-reviewed studies published in medical journals, that have examined cabbage leaf poultices for breast engorgement in lactating women, for knee osteoarthritis, and for ankle sprains. The results are consistently positive. Swelling decreases faster with cabbage poultices than with standard treatment in several of these studies. This is no longer folk medicine. It's published evidence. Cabbage contains compounds, primarily sinigrin and glucosinolates, with real anti-inflammatory properties. It also has a structure that makes it only effective as a topical treatment. It is flexible to adapt to the contours of the body, retains moisture against the skin, and when lightly squeezed releases its active compounds. Why it works: the sinigrin and glucosinolates in cabbage have documented anti-inflammatory properties. The leaf structure retains moisture and releases the compounds when applied to the skin. Clinical trials show superior swelling reduction compared to standard treatment in various contexts. How to prepare it: chill a whole cabbage. Remove the outer leaves. Roll over them with a rolling pin to bruise them slightly. This releases the compounds. Apply directly to the swollen area. Cover with a bandage and leave for 2 hours. Repeat twice a day. Remedy number 13: mineral alum. Cuts, mouth ulcers, and hemostasis barbers kept it on the counter. A razor cut touched with alum would stop bleeding in 30 seconds. Alum, potassium aluminum sulfate, is a medicinal mineral that has been used for centuries before becoming a food preservative and deodorant. Traditional healers applied it to cuts, minor wounds, and mouth sores, and it did something remarkable. It stopped bleeding almost immediately and sealed the tissue against infection. The mechanism is pure chemistry. Alum is a powerful astringent. It causes the proteins in the tissue to contract, literally squeezing the cells and closing the small blood vessels on the surface of the wound. It stops the bleeding. It also creates a hostile chemical environment for bacteria by lowering the pH and drawing moisture out of microbial cells. Traditional barbers kept alum stones on the counter for exactly this. A razor cut touched with alum would stop bleeding within 30 seconds. Why it works: alum is a powerful astringent that contracts tissue proteins, closing small blood vessels. It creates an acidic pH and low water activity environment hostile to bacteria. The same principle as modern surgical astringents. How to prepare it for cuts: moisten the alum stone and press it on the wound for 30 seconds. For mouth ulcers, apply a pinch of alum powder directly to the sore for 60 seconds, then rinse. For a razor cut, A moistened alum stone passed over the cut stops the bleeding immediately. Remedy number 14. Ginger compresses. Joint pain, muscle stiffness, and menstruation. Ingested ginger has anti-inflammatory effects. Ginger applied to the skin has a different and more immediate effect. Ginger has hundreds of clinical trials documenting its anti-inflammatory effects when taken orally. But ginger compresses applied to the skin work through a different mechanism and with more immediate results. Direct penetration into the surface tissue, causing immediate vasodilation, expansion of blood vessels, and a dramatic increase in local circulation. Increased circulation in an area means more oxygen, more immune cells, faster elimination of inflammatory compounds, and direct heat on the tense muscle or joint. For deep joint pain from arthritis, muscle stiffness from an injury, or menstrual cramps, a warm ginger compress can provide relief in minutes that is qualitatively different from what can be achieved orally. Japanese Kampo medicine and traditional Chinese medicine used it extensively. Why it works? Gingerols and shogales applied to the skin cause immediate local vasodilation, increasing circulation in the underlying tissue. This accelerates the elimination of inflammatory compounds and delivers internal heat to the tissue. It's a different and faster mechanism than ingestion. How to prepare it? Grate or slice a large piece of fresh ginger. Simmer gently in water for 10 minutes without boiling. Soak a cloth in the hot ginger water. Partially wring it out and apply it to the sore area as hot as you can tolerate. Cover with a dry cloth to retain the heat. Replace every 5 minutes for 20 minutes. Remedy number 15. Concentrated thyme infusion. Bronchitis, cough, and respiratory infection. The European Commission has approved it as a recognized medical treatment, not as a folk remedy, as a medicine. If there's one herb that straddles the line between folk remedy and pharmaceutical territory, it's thyme. Thymol, its main active compound, is the same compound used in Listerine, commercial antiseptic solutions, and some pharmaceutical cough preparations. Thymol's antimicrobial potency against respiratory pathogens is so well documented that European Commission regulatory bodies have formally approved thyme preparations for the treatment of coughs and upper respiratory infections, not as a folk remedy, as a recognized medical treatment. The difference between a thyme infusion and a thyme concentrate is significant. A weak infusion barely releases any volatile oils. The concentrate, made with a large quantity of dried thyme in freshly boiled water and covered for 15 minutes, releases and retains the full therapeutic dose of thymol. Why it works? Thymol from thyme is a broad-spectrum antiseptic with documented antimicrobial activity against respiratory pathogens. Inhaled as steam from hot tea and then swallowed, it comes into direct contact with mucous membranes, eliminating the bacteria and viruses causing the infection. Approved by the European Commission as a medical treatment. How to prepare it? Pack 2 heaped tablespoons of dried thyme into 240 milliliters of freshly boiled water. Cover immediately. This is crucial to retain the volatile oils. Let it steep for 15 minutes. Strain and drink hot with honey 3 times a day during illness. Herbalists, we've reached the last 5. And these are the ones that surprised me the most on the entire list. Number 18. The one I promised dentists used before modern anesthesia. And number 20. The one used for the most serious infected wounds in medieval Europe. The last 2 for today. Remedy number 16. Application of fresh aloe vera. Burns, wounds, and irritated skin. 6,000 years of wound healing. Modern clinical studies show it heals burns faster than standard pharmaceutical dressings. Aloe vera is the remedy on this list that most people have at home without realizing what they have. That thick, spiny succulent that we all have on a windowsill and forget to water for months on end. Egyptian medical records from 4,000 years ago describe it as the plant of immortality. Greek physicians used it for wounds and digestive problems. When modern clinical trials arrived, they found that aloe gel heals first and second-degree burns measurably faster than standard pharmaceutical dressings, including petroleum jelly-based ones. A systematic review of the literature concluded exactly that. Fresh aloe is always more effective than commercial gels, which are usually highly diluted. Why it works? Asamanin polysaccharides accelerate tissue repair and reduce inflammation. Glycoproteins stimulate fibroblast proliferation for new tissue formation. Antimicrobial properties protect the wound from infection. More than 75 active compounds identified. How to prepare it? Tear off a leaf and extract the clear gel inside. Apply directly to the burn or wound. Repeat several times a day. Store the cut leaf in the refrigerator between applications. For digestive use, mix the juice from the inner gel with water. Remedy number 17, rice water. Irritated skin and gastroenteritis. The WHO studied it as a basis for oral rehydration solutions in cholera epidemics. The liquid we always pour down the sink. Rice water is the humblest remedy on this list. It's the liquid left over from soaking or cooking rice, the stuff we all throw down the sink without a second thought. But it has two completely different and well-documented uses. Applied to the skin as a wash or compress, it noticeably soothes irritated and inflamed skin. The mechanism involves rice inositol, which supports the skin's barrier function, plus starch compounds that form a protective film over the irritated tissue, reducing water loss and protecting damaged cells. Japanese and Korean beauty traditions have built entire philosophies around fermented rice water for the skin. Clinical research on rice water for atopic dermatitis shows measurable improvements in skin barrier function. Taken internally during gastroenteritis, it provides easily absorbed carbohydrates, electrolytes, and a soothing effect on inflamed intestinal walls. The WHO studied rehydration formulas based on rice water for cholera epidemics. Why it works? The inositol in rice supports the skin's barrier function. Starch compounds form a protective film over irritated tissue. Internally, it provides rapidly absorbed carbohydrates and electrolytes with a soothing effect on the intestinal mucosa. The WHO has validated its use for rehydration during epidemics. How to prepare it? Soak 2 cups of uncooked white rice in 4 cups of water for 30 minutes. Strain. For the skin, apply the water as a wash or soak a cloth and use as a compress. For digestion, drink the hot rice water with a pinch of salt during gastroenteritis. Remedy number 18, clove oil on the tooth. Tooth pain, here it is. The dental anesthetic before lidocaine, whose active ingredient is still used in dental cements and sealants today. Here it is, the one I promised at the beginning, clove oil for toothaches. Clove contains eugenol, a compound so effective at blocking pain signaling in nerve tissue that it's classified as a local anesthetic and analgesic. Applied directly to an exposed nerve or inflamed gum, eugenol binds to nerve receptors and blocks pain transmission. The effect is felt within seconds. This wasn't folklore. Clove oil was the primary dental anesthetic throughout the 19th century and into the early 20th. Professional dentists used it long before synthetic lidocaine existed. It was standard practice in dentistry, and eugenol is still present today in dental cements, root canal sealants, and dental packing materials used by dentists. The dental industry has been using clove medicine for centuries. It just comes in pharmaceutical packaging now. Why it works? Eugenol blocks pain receptors in nerve tissue, acting as a local anesthetic. It also has an additional anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial effect. It not only masks the pain, but also addresses the inflammation or infection causing it. The effect begins within seconds. How to prepare it? Place a drop of clove essential oil on a cotton ball and apply directly to the aching tooth or inflamed gum. Alternatively, place a whole, dried clove against the tooth and bite down gently. The anesthetic effect begins within 30 seconds and lasts between 30 and 60 minutes. Remedy number 19, burnt bread on the wound. Infected wounds with onset accidental charcoal. The same principle as activated charcoal dressings used in modern medicine. This sounds so strange it almost defies explanation. Lightly charred bread, toasted until burnt, applied to minor infected wounds. But when you understand what's happening, the logic is elegant. Charred bread is, at a basic chemical level, a form of charcoal, not as refined or porous as activated charcoal, but functionally similar. Traditional healers who applied burnt bread to infected cuts and pulled wounds were using the same principle of adsorption. The charcoal binds bacterial toxins and inflammatory compounds and draws them out of the tissue. This remedy appears in European rural folk medicine, in ancient American household guides, and in diverse healing traditions globally. It was especially common for children's wounds and for working people without access to any formal treatment. Why it works? Charred bread is, at a chemical level, a form of charcoal that adsorbs bacterial toxins and inflammatory compounds, drawing them out of the tissue. It's the same principle as activated charcoal dressings used in modern chronic wound medicine. How to prepare it? Burn a slice of bread until it is completely charred but not crumbling. Let it cool. Apply it to the wound. Cover with a clean cloth and leave for several hours. Change 2 or 3 times a day. Remedy number 20. Bread and milk poultice. Boils, splinters, and infected wounds that heal poorly. Medieval European medicine for the most serious infected wounds. And the most elegant principle on the whole list. And here we are. The last one. The one I saved for last, because it represents the oldest tradition of wound care using organic material. Bread soaked in warm milk and applied to infected wounds, boils, splinters embedded deep in the tissue, wounds just beginning to abscess. It sounds like utter desperation, but it was used by wound healers in medieval Europe, colonial America, frontier medicine, and 20th century home care because it worked consistently enough to be used generation after generation. The mechanism, when understood, is elegant. The warm milk softens the tissue, especially the hardened keratin that forms on and around boils, splinters, and embedded infections. That's critical. An embedded splinter or a forming abscess is surrounded by a fortress of hardened tissue, and nothing will dislodge it until that fortress softens. The lactic acid and milk proteins create the gentle, sustained moisture needed to soften even the toughest toughness. The bread acts as a base, keeping the warm milk against the skin for an extended period. Why it works? Warm milk softens the hardened tissue around the boil or splinter with its lactic acid and proteins. Bread retains warm moisture against the skin for a sustained period. The charcoal in the bread, especially if it's day-old, adds a mild drawing effect. The sustained heat creates the conditions the body needs to resolve the infection on its own. How to prepare it? Crumble a slice of bread into a bowl. Pour warm milk over it until it is completely soaked and soft. Apply the warm poultice directly to the boil, infected wound, or splinter. Cover with a cloth and leave for several hours or overnight. Replace twice a day. Within 1 or 2 days, most boils will have reached the head and most splinters will have migrated to the surface. 20 remedies, and in all of them the same final principle. That knowledge was yours. It always was. And now you have it back. Herbalists, tell me in the comments which of these 20 you remember seeing at your grandparents' or parents' house. Which one surprised you the most to discover has a scientific explanation? And which one are you going to try the next time you need it? If this video reminded you of something you'd forgotten, give it a like and share it with someone who needs a reminder too.